Jocelyn Ovalle, who is here on the webinar as well and will speak later in the webinar. So we created a program at Forefront called the Democracy Initiative at the start of 2018. And it was a 3-year program essentially to focus on the changing landscape of civic engagement and understanding the complexities of not just voter registration and voter engagement, but really looking at voter enhancement as well as the importance of a fair and accurate census count that happens once a decade. And because there is so much planning that takes place for the census count across the country, it really is an all-state, all-hands-on-deck effort for every state in our nation. So having said that, the importance of nonprofits and government and philanthropy working together could never be more important than it is now for a decennial census, because it really takes everyone who's in leadership, anyone who's part of our community in leadership, to really help get the word out about the importance of a fair and accurate count and what that means for the next decade ahead. Now, it's very much in alignment with the importance of a fair and accurate election. And as we embark less than 60 days out on a very important election year, understanding that there are presidential election is at stake, understanding that there are all levels of government races that are at stake, we felt at Forefront that it was really important to kick off September with a discussion on the importance of getting ourselves registered. If we're not registered already, making sure that our folks that can do get registered in time so that they can make informed decisions at the polls November 3rd, and also recognizing that this is a way of really lifting up our voices. It is a time when we as individuals can really help change our future and make a difference. So having said that, we wanted to bring Chicago Votes here today to kick off a conversation so that we could all talk together about the importance of the elections and what this, what this means for all of us. So I am really excited to introduce our guest speaker here with us today. Stevie Valles is the Executive Director of Chicago Votes. I want to read a little bit from his bio before turning it over to him to kick us off. But Stevie grew up in Ohio, in Cincinnati. He's lived all over, including places like Michigan, Virginia, Alabama, DC, Dallas, Austin, and of course now he is in Chicago here with us. He says that although he's not from the Windy City, he says that he got here as soon as he could. He is a graduate of Oakwood University with a bachelor's in social work. He has committed his entire career to making sure that all people have a voice and are welcome as equals. And then prior to joining Chicago Votes, he was director of National Voter Registration Day, which we will also talk about a little later in our program. He's worked for the US Senate, the Texas legislature, and a slew of campaigns ranging from presidential to gubernatorial to affordable housing. He is a member of the Circle for Justice Innovations. He's a board member for Change Illinois. He's a fellow Cook County Community Advisory Council member along with me. And he's also a member of the City of Chicago Civic Engagement Advisory Council. I'm going to ask Stevie to take it away. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey everyone, thank you for the introduction. Hope everybody is having a good, rainy Chicago day. I am Stevie Valles. I am the Executive Director of Chicago Votes, and I'll talk a little bit about what Chicago Votes is doing in the realm of civic engagement and voting. So Chicago Votes is a nonprofit that focuses on getting young people engaged in the political process. We do that through voter registration, civic education, civic activation, and leadership development. Or if you like acronyms, READ, registration, education, activation, development. What that looks like, I mean, the communities we work in include people who experience incarceration. So those are people who are between the ages of 17 and 35 who are either in prison, in pretrial detention at the Cook County Jail, or in juvenile detention centers. There's a majority of people who are in prison, juvie, or the Cook County Jail are under the age of 35 and are predominantly people of color. We work in colleges, universities, and high schools. We also work in the creative scene, and we do that through 3 programs: Parades to the Polls, where we take young people on parades to go vote; uh, Unlock Civics, where we do voter registration, voter education, and voter turnout inside jails, prisons, and juvenile detention centers; and our Give a Shit program. And I'm sorry if that offends anyone, but young people like it. Which is our work in the creative scene to make politics a little bit more accessible for people who aren't necessarily interested in politics. And believe it or not, there's a good number of young people who are not. Um, and, you know, what we're doing this election cycle is well, let me back up. Every year, we run leadership development programs that essentially train young people how to run the programs in the communities that I just described. We essentially provide the framework and train and develop young organizers by giving them hands-on experience in doing the work inside these different communities that I just mentioned, as well as running the programs at Chicago Votes that I just mentioned. This year, we have 12 community organizers who are working on a number of different things. One, our biggest focus, obviously, is the 2020 elections in the context of COVID-19. So we're doing phone and text banks every Thursday and Tuesday, where we recruit young people to be election judges. We call low propensity voters and help them make a plan to vote, support people in requesting their absentee ballot, and educate young people about what is going to be on their ballot come November. We're distributing a voter guide that will help young people understand what's on this ballot beyond the presidential array, beyond the presidential election. So here in Chicago, that is the state's attorney election, as well as the over 60 judges that are up for retention on the ballot this election, as well as making sure people understand what the tax ballot initiative that's going to be on the ballot is, or the ballot initiative that has to do with the graduated income tax, explaining that to young voters so they can go to the ballot confidently. We're also working to ensure that the Cook County Jail has polling machines in it. Chicago Votes is part of a 3-year effort to write, advocate for, and ultimately pass a bill that turned the Cook County Jail into a polling location. And the Cook County Jail is the only polling location that's a jail in the entire country. And during COVID, there were whispers of trying to transition to an all absentee ballot program inside the jail. We feel that there's enough space and enough brain power between us, the Cook County Clerk's Office, the Chicago Board of Elections, as well as the jail, to come up with a safe way for those polling machines to stay in the jail. And that's important because without those polling machines, the voters who are in pretrial detention are not able to utilize things like same-day voter registration, which are really important. We also are recruiting young election judges. As many of you probably know, election judges traditionally are 60 plus in age, and that is also a community that is most at risk of contracting the coronavirus. So we feel that it is our duty to ensure that elections go smooth by recruiting young people to serve in those positions. And also, that's a great opportunity to develop young leaders to be civically minded here in the city of Chicago. And the last thing we're doing this election is doing a lot of work around felony disenfranchisement. So a lot of know your rights workshops, making sure people understand who is allowed to vote in Illinois versus who is still disenfranchised in Illinois by way of our legal system. And so everybody on this call knows, in case you don't, when you're in pretrial detention in Illinois, you are an eligible voter. When you're in jail, you have not been convicted of any crimes. But unfortunately, here in Illinois and across the nation, this is a community that is disenfranchised because of misinformation. Also, upon release from prison in Illinois, you have your rights restored. Again, we passed a bill. That bill that we passed to turn the Cook County Jail into a polling location also required that when people are released from prison, they're given know your rights guides as well as voter registration forms. So when they are released, they know their rights and they can be an informed civic participant. And we also passed a bill that will require people with less than 12 months left on their prison sentence to have access to civic education courses that are taught by their peers inside the prison upon their release. So that's kind of a broad stroke of what Chicago Votes does in general and what we're focusing on this election cycle.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So today is the forum. We're having an open conversation. Thank you, Stevie and Anita, for setting that kind of context. What we wanted to do next, and again, this is our first time doing it, so everybody cross your fingers with me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to put up a little poll of possible activities that folks are doing that want to do for voter engagement this year. So, okay, I'm going to share the screen again with a different image. And if you go up to the top of your viewing screen, you should be able to see an option that says annotate, and then you'll be able to put a stamp in this grid once I get it up. Oh, we're making progress. We're making progress. All right. So as I said, are hoping to do voter engagement activities this year. If you move your mouse up to the top center of your screen, hey, I see somebody's got a check mark there. Awesome, awesome. You should see an annotate option. You can use stamps, you can use the pencil, whatever you want. But we're trying to get a sense of what types of voter engagement folks are thinking about using this year and let that kind of guide our conversation. I also wanted to go ahead and open it up if a burning question ready for Stevie or for Anita. I'm going to take a look at the chat box. Feel free to throw your questions into the chat or unmute yourself. To get us started, I see a lot of check boxes in the social media activities and storms. Yaslin, I know you've done quite a bit with that. Would you want to talk for a minute about your experiences there, and then we can get Stevie's take as well?
Sure. I can talk about, do you mean our thunderclaps? Our famous thunder. Yeah, so hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. I'm the Associate Manager of the Democracy Initiative, so I work very closely with Anita. So I wanted to talk briefly about sort of our social media thunderclaps. I think a lot of you guys recognize them as Twitter storms, social media blitzes. So with the census stuff, we have basically been doing these thunderclaps, which is just an opportunity for organizations, elected officials, even individuals to really make some noise on social media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever is comfortable for folks. And so we allot about 90 minutes to sometimes 2 hours just on a dedicated day to really focus on census outreach and raising awareness. So we've done a couple themes in the past, such as, you know, we had Illinois Census Month where we had Pride Day, we celebrate Black Census Day, Immigrant and Refugee Day. And so it's just an opportunity for all of us to come together and to make as much noise as possible. And it's really it's like a clap, right? So to have a ripple effect afterwards. We tend to be trending online. Twitter is usually where you see the trends. So we've been trending like either the top 5 slots, and we use a hashtag in particular. So for the census outreach efforts, we do make IL Count, or we use IL Count Me in 2020. IL Count Me in 2020, sorry. But it's just an opportunity for us to just work collaboratively, given the fact that with the census as well as voter engagement, it's all about collaboration and unity. So it's a great opportunity to engage. And so what we do also is that we release a toolkit. We've been doing these thunderclaps bi-weekly since April. So what we do is create a toolkit that then we send out to all of our contacts, all of our partners, and they just use it's just like a simple copy and paste. We include graphics, posts, as well as census PSAs that people have created. And it's a great time. It's a great opportunity to really make as much noise, because that's the purpose of them.
And Chicago Votes' approach to social media is very similar. You know, we do these big kind of weeks or days of action, as we call them, which are essentially the same thing as the thunderclaps, to try to get I like the thunderclap phrasing better, so I might steal that. But also we just try to be mindful of our audiences depending on the platform that we're using. And we try to present information in a way that makes it easier for whatever audience on whatever platform that we're using to share it. For example, we've noticed that Twitter is a platform where short, you know, I don't want to say radical, but, you know, young voices are very prevalent on Twitter, and very opinionated on Twitter. And we try to follow the different organizations, influencers, and individuals who work in the demographics that we work in, whether that is organizations that do a lot of prison work, organizations that do a lot of college or institutional work, or people who work in the cultural scene. And we try to share their content, we try to follow them, and we try to develop and put out content that we know is more likely to be shared amongst those audiences. And that takes a little bit of getting to know the platform and the community on the digital space, which has been interesting to do during COVID. On Instagram, which is another really popular platform for young people, especially between the ages of like 16 to 22. We try to come up with graphics and post them almost in a series of pictures, which allow people to share each individual graphic on their story. So we will post one, you know, we'll put up one post and we'll have 10 to 15 pictures associated with that post, which gives people access to share each individual thing on their stories, so you can disseminate more information that way. And on Facebook, we have an older audience. On Facebook, we tend to post like the wonkier stuff, the articles, if we get an op-ed placed, if we get traditional media hits. That's the audience that typically will like to engage with that content. So in addition to the thunderclaps, week of actions, blitzes, whatever you want to call them, just being mindful of the content and having diverse content for diverse platforms is highly effective.
I'm curious for the group, because we have so many folks that have check marks in that social media activity. Is there anyone doing anything that doesn't fall in sort of the two categories that Yaslin and Stevie, or not just two categories, but the examples that Yaslin and Stevie gave? I'm wondering if there are any other things that folks are trying, things they're thinking about trying. And if you, again, feel free to answer in the chat box. If you want to unmute yourself, you're welcome to do that as well. I also have a question for Yaslin that came in. Someone asked when the toolkit for the September 22nd Thunderclap will be available.
Yes, I was about to respond to Anne. So we actually have two coming up. So we actually have one this Thursday, and that one is focused. We're also working with our central office to do a census at work day, because the state of Illinois actually did one of them last month. And so the next one is, so that's the 10th of this month, so this Thursday, and then the 22nd. We actually wanted to do that one on the 22nd because that's actually National Voter Registration Day. And so it's just an opportunity for all of us to engage, to celebrate that day. And so that one is going to be, I can give you when it's going to be. So it's going to be from 11 to 12:30. The toolkit will be available most likely that Monday. So that would be the 21st of September. However, I can get your email information to include it because we have a distribution list to send the toolkit out to folks. So yeah, so that one will be, one of the things that we wanted to do this month is the fact that the census is still going on. So we're going to be integrating both of these messages for the Thunderclap.
Awesome. Thanks, Yaslin. And then Anita shared a really great question, especially since we are a group of nonprofit folks on here today. Stevie, could you talk a little bit about GOTV efforts for nonpartisan work? Because as you know, as everyone probably knows on this call, when we're working directly from our nonprofits, we can't be advocating for specific candidates, despite probably strong personal feelings, but what that looks like for us in our nonprofit day jobs.
Right. So Chicago Votes is a nonpartisan nonprofit as well. And what we found is that engaging with young people is going to be, you're going to have more luck engaging with young people and getting them to believe in voting if you are not advocating for any candidate. If you are just calling them to provide information and answer any questions that they have, we find that that is a highly effective tactic. A lot of times people are not turning out to vote due to voter apathy or just simply being tired of hearing people advocate for their candidate and not feeling like they're getting objective information. And they may be getting tricked into voting for somebody based off of whoever's calling them. So what we try to do is simply just provide folks with objective information and focus on down ballot. We don't talk to folks about the presidential election. We talk to them about, as I mentioned, the state's attorney's election. Tell people that the state's attorney is the person who gets to decide who to prosecute. You know, we're living in a racially tense period in our country and in the city. So making sure people understand that the state's attorney gets to decide if a cop gets prosecuted for, using excessive force on a young person in the city. That's the state's attorney's job to make that decision. And that's not a partisan thing to tell people. That's just a fact. When people, again, with the racially tense period that we're living in, making sure people understand that you get to vote for over 60 judges who are on the ballot, making sure people understand that when you're talking about race, Black and brown people, even though we make up a small component of America's population, we make up a majority of America's prison and jail population. And the judges are the ones who get to decide that. So making sure folks understand that these judges are going to be on the ballot, and you as a voter and a participant in democracy get to decide if these judges should retain their seat or not. Now, we also try to provide people on basic nonpartisan information about where these candidates stand on specific issues based off questionnaires that we send out to them that we develop in partnership with young people based off of the issues that young people care about. So I think it's important to understand that there is a lot of information and a lot of questions that you can answer while wearing your nonpartisan hat. And it's important to understand that people, voters, especially low propensity voters, have proven to trust that information more than they trust anybody calling them to advocate for one candidate or another. And again, that can be done through social media by just putting out infographics, by putting out the voter guides, by just telling people the basic information about what they need to simply go vote, how to request an absentee ballot, when voter registration deadlines are. what the changes are that are being made to this election cycle based off COVID, ballot drop boxes, extended early voting, extended hours. So we try to just do a lot of education. And then by helping them make a plan to go vote, we're encouraging them to take an action, which also is nonpartisan.
That's great. I'm really curious about that questionnaire you mentioned, asking elected officials about things that young people are specifically interested in. Is that linkable? Do you have that, something that folks could take a look at and maybe share to their audiences as well?
We shall. It is hard to get candidates to fill out questionnaires. And judges are really difficult because judges don't have to take public stances on anything. It's
Right.
weird. In Chicago, the judges all run as Democrats. So they are affiliated with a party, but they are not required to take any public stances, nor is it really ethical for them to take public stances on anything before they run for office. But they still have to run on a party for a party seat or be associated with a party, which is really, really weird. So what we do is the American Bar Association does evaluations on judges, and they provide us with that information. And then based off of those evaluations, we draft up a voter guide that is like digestible for people to look at and read. And we've also started doing nonpartisan court watching to gather data on the things that the American Bar Association is not gathering data on. Things like racial bias, general environment of the courtroom, gender bias and sentencing biases. And hopefully as we develop that over time, we'll be able to provide more information for judicial candidates. I say all that to say that late September, we're trying to have our voter guides ready to rock and roll as soon as early voting starts. The easiest way I would say to get access to that is being on our email list. So if you're not on our email list, just send me your email and make sure you'll get on there, and following us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And all of that will be shareable.
Awesome, thanks. Anita also had the great question of, what are you doing differently this year? I'm sure there are lots and lots of things that are different for socially distancing live engagements.
Yeah, I can answer that. Oh, it was directed to me, so I will answer that.
Everyone is welcome to answer.
Okay, great. So for us, so one of the things that we used to do were give a shit happy hours. Again, I'm sorry if that language offends anyone. But we can't have those happy hours in person. And what those happy hours were essentially entry points for people to get involved in the civic infrastructure of Chicago, who wouldn't necessarily want to come to a panel, wouldn't necessarily want to come to a voter registration drive, but would be interested in coming to a concert or a fashion show. And we would theme these happy hours around certain issues and engage young people in those issues when they came to those happy hours. Since we can't have happy hours, we started having weekly Instagram live interviews called Shit Talks. So every Thursday night at 8:30 p.m. on our Instagram live, we interview activists, elected officials, artists, organizers, and just talk to them about the issues that they care about, to kind of give voice to young people who don't think that there is a voice for them in this civic infrastructure. We've also been having Zoom happy hours. We do Zoom phone banks and text banks. We do little themes, like one time we had we do like Zoom bingo for phone banks. Like if you got hung up on, check. If you got to commit to vote or plan to vote, check. And if you get it all right, you get a prize at the end. We've done, try to come to your Zoom with like a bonfire theme. So we'll have like different images that folks could put up in their background, and they'll like dress up as if they're at a bonfire or something. of those sorts. So we're trying to be super innovative. And there's a bunch of other things that we've tried to do. We've refrained from hosting any public facing events, and we haven't really taken any public invitations to come do voter registration drives at any events, but we put together toolkits for folks to do voter registration while maintaining social distance.
What are the prizes if they win the bingo?
Let's see. So we have we launched an online store where you could get cool little
Oh, I've seen that.
t-shirts. Yeah, you can get jerseys, t-shirts, and if you win bingo, you'll get like a discount code. Sometimes it's 50% off, sometimes it's 100% off. It all depends on how fundraising is going.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, I wanted to switch a little bit. So the second most popular category was webinars. And as you know, all of us are becoming way too familiar with all the different platforms you can host a webinar on. I was curious if folks in the group, do you feel like you have all of the tools that you need to host the webinars in the way that you want to? Is there a tool that you think is way better than Zoom or Teams or any of the sort of standard ones? What are folks feeling about their capacity and their energy level for hosting webinars related to voter engagement?
I think, well, I'm Kiara. Hi, how's it going?
Hi.
I work for the Chicago Learning Exchange and I'm a program associate. I guess when it comes to webinars, or I guess my organization is looking to do professional development. And those professional, we have a grant called Writing in May, Youth Digital Media Activism. And within that grant, we have 3 different grantees working on different projects. And they've really been trying to figure out ways to engage youth after the summer is gone on, because like a part of their thing is to create like an artifact in which our practitioners can use. But in that artifact, it's about like youth voice too, right? So it's about trying to get not only webinars for like the young people, but for the practitioners that are helping the young people so that they know how to speak with them. And I think that that's really where we are, is trying to find those people who can help with that.
Awesome, thanks.
We've just been trying to keep it on Zoom. Everybody seems to know how to use it. And, when people don't know how to use certain platforms, I hate just causing that anxiety for folks. It seems like everybody knows how to use Zoom. So we decided to purchase Zoom, which was huge for us, as silly as that sounds. But just buying anything as a nonprofit, like a scrappy young nonprofit, it's just like, no, we didn't budget for that. So just trying to be mindful and like pivoting our budget and shifting it in this age, and, just making the investment to make it easier for everyone.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear that. I mean, at Forefront, we also had to totally change the structure of our account because of the extent to which we're using it now. So I'm sure lots of people sympathize with that position. There are a couple of check marks in the other box. Is anyone willing to share what other activities that we didn't capture in our little poll? Hold this space for a bit. I've been chatting with other folks that are facilitating conversations that we have to hold much longer because you have to navigate to the unmute button and.
Sure, this is Ann Vanderweel with Metropolitan Family Services, and I guess I interpreted the other, we're also creating somewhat of a voter education toolkit guide that we're distributing to our staff in a similar way, almost a train the trainer, to make sure that our staff is educated, and so that when they interact with their clients, they can in turn educate them as well. So we'll keep that toolkit available internally to staff, and it's available to share with others as they see fit.
Awesome. I love that idea of having staff that maybe you know, it's not in their day-to-day job description, but kind of giving them the option of saying, you can do this too, you can get involved. That's great. Let's see, we got a question that came in. Oh, no. Well, I'll just read it. My organization is located in the south suburbs. Are there resources you recommend to engage voters who live outside Chicago? And I'm going to give a bit of a teaser. I know Sarah and Yaslin have some resources we're going to share in just a few minutes when we get sort of towards the end of the webinar. Oh yeah, a local league of women voters. That's a great suggestion. I got a chance to speak in a previous role I had a few years back at a suburban chapter, and those were formidable women. It was a really, I think I got a lot more out of it from listening to what they had to say than they had to getting out of what I had to say, but it was a great exchange. So League of Women Voters, that's a great resource. And then, yeah, Stevie, did you have another question that you were going to address?
Yes, I got this question from Kira, who is one of Chicago Votes' volunteer. She actually just told me she has one of our tablecloths. But since we're not doing any public events, enjoy it, you know, enjoy that tablecloth. And so Kira asked me to speak to how youth have been civically activated, even though shelter in place and the tactics we have used. You know, that's a really good question. One of the things, so we're running a leadership development program right now with 12 young, very new to civics, up and coming leaders, and it's all been remote. So the emphasis on social media has been heightened, obviously. We've been just giving young people the tools to engage their audiences in meaningful ways. A lot of our dialogue with youth has come by way of direct messages on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, as opposed to phone banks and text banks traditionally, or knocking on doors, or going to community events. Because of the political dynamics that we're living in addition to the pandemic, again, the racial tension that we're experiencing, especially around police's engagement with youth of color, giving folks a lot. We have captive audiences at home. So putting together graphics and content so young people can learn how to read the city budget, understand the breakdown of the city budget, and very easy and digestible infographics. Again, those like 7 to 8 pictures that could come in run posts where a young person could just swipe through and see how much money goes to each part of the city budget, as opposed to asking a young person to read the 300 pages of the city budget. You know, we're able to see what our audiences care about more easily by following them on social media, seeing what they're posting, and kind of getting a sense of what the culture is and tailoring our posts to speak to what young people actually care about. That's been an advantage that's come about due to the pandemic that wasn't necessarily there at first. Just people are just on social media right now more than they would be in general. And then, you know, in addition to sharing that stuff or liking their posts, like making those direct asks of them via social media. Can you be an election judge? Can you volunteer at a phone bank? Can you come to a shit talk? Can you like text your friends to get them engaged? Can you share our voter guide? What do you think our voter guide should be named? You know, just little stuff like that that gets the dialogue going. Has been highly effective. And it's going to be interesting after this ends. I don't necessarily want to stop the amount of social media engagement that we've been doing. So we're going to have a conversation internally about how do we expand to not diminish the amount of digital engagement we're doing, but to continue that digital engagement while also continuing our community engagement. So yeah.
Awesome, thanks. So I know I wanted to leave some time for Yaslin and Sarah to share some resources that hopefully will be available to everyone. Oh, it looks like we got another question. So good. I was going to say, while they're talking and sharing resources, please feel free to continue to put questions in the chat. So we've got right now, I'm talking with a lot of colleagues who aren't at orgs doing voter education work, but want to get involved, particularly the presidential election. They have no idea how. Any suggestions? Yaslin, does that feel like it fits in maybe as a lead up to the webinar?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So maybe I guess I'm going next. So one of the things that I did want to mention is that, so next Tuesday, we are hosting a GOTC and GOTV, so Get Out the Count and Get Out the Vote webinar. So a lot of census folks are going to be integrating sort of their efforts into GOTV, but it's just an opportunity to sort of see what efforts are ongoing, whether Chicago or statewide. So we'll be providing resources. I know I'm kind of skipping ahead because Sarah we've kind of put together what we call a LibGuide of resources. And so one of the things that we actually have is one of our grantees of ours for the census work. They're like, well, there's like a lack of funding, right? And so it's like having to find innovative and creative ways of doing voter engagement work. So I will be including the registration link actually on the chat, but so the webinar will actually be next Tuesday at 10 a.m. So I see that Anita also shared something. I apologize. Oh, okay. Yeah, so Anne, I think if you could share your voter guide, that would be awesome. Because I do know that was something, we ran a program in 2018, like a mini grant program, where we partnered with Ballot Ready in terms of offering our grantees a voter guide just to see what's on people's ballots. So that would be awesome.
Great. So Yaslin, if you want to share that link for the registration in the chat, and then Sarah, I think we're ready to kick it over to you to talk about the LibGuide, and if you want to share that link. This is one of the things I actually really like about being on Zoom is it's so much easier to share resources instead of printing a million things.
That is very true. So yes, so we had a guide on civic engagement, kind of more broadly. I'm dropping the link for that in the chat. And let's see. Oh, Susie, I believe you need to stop sharing your screen so that I can share my screen. There we go. So the resource guides are kind of just little mini websites where we bring together a bunch of resources on topics. So for this one, as you can see, we have some things about civic engagement generally and nonprofits, forefront advocacy work, and a feed for a 60-second civics podcast, which is great. We, of course, have been focusing a little more on these other tabs about getting out the vote for voter registration. So here, there are a bunch of kind of different links. Speaking of webinars, the National Voter Registration Day website had a webinar for planning events in this particular time to take into account needs of social distancing and social media and all of those concerns. We also have a link for their webinar schedule. So they have recordings of all of their past webinars, and they still have a few more they're going to be doing this season if you wanted to check them out. So kind of for all of this, just kind of general different resources on things. I love that people mentioned the League of Women Voters because I did link their planning a voter registration drive guide here, as well as the National Voter Registration Day website's toolkit for individuals. They also have toolkits for organizations as well. So if you just go to that link, you'll be able to navigate pretty easily to their other things. Some of the work for integrating the census work as well as voter registration is kind of over here. Some things about election protection, so not just voter registration, but on the kind of day of, a couple of sites that work with that. That can also help for people who want to get involved. If your organization doesn't want to kind of build your own program for this from the ground up, you can always check out something like the Election Protection Coalition and see if kind of partnering with them or just kind of using their resources to build some of your own work can be helpful instead of just trying to, you know, reinvent the wheel all on your own. Also, a couple of other ways to get involved. The Instill I Vote can call to action, and Chicago Votes, their website's linked there as well. For a couple of the questions that were asked earlier, with trying to engage people outside of the city of Chicago, you might also talk to local community centers. They already have tons of programs in a wide variety of areas, so they probably have something dealing with voter registration or helping people get to the polls or something in that range of things if you wanted to work with them or see what their work is. Yeah, community centers are kind of a great resource in that general area. And for judges, it can be really difficult to research your judges. One website that we'll be updating in the next week or so, because that's when all of the legal associations will be releasing their grades basically for judges, is just voteforjudges.org. This is specifically for Chicago area, so unfortunately, if that's not where you are, it's not very helpful. But they at least collect all of the ratings by all of these different bar associations. So you can see if, you know, depending on what kind of your focus is, the Arab American Bar Association, all of these will tell you what the acronyms stand for. You can see how they have rated all of the potential judge candidates, whether they say they are not qualified, qualified, or highly qualified, which isn't a lot of detail, but can be at least a starting place for trying to look up their name and trying to see why they might not be considered qualified or why they're only considered qualified and not highly qualified, and see how that kind of plays into your opinions on these topics and things. All right, and that is more or less what I have for kind of resources at this point. I also just show the voter registration tab. Some of this is Illinois specific. A couple of them will work nationwide though. The Vote USA ballot tools or the Vote 411 voter guides. You can look those up for basically anywhere in the country, as well as the campus vote protection for students. So that kind of goes state by state so that you can figure out if your student ID will work as ID if you're in a state that requires voter ID, or any kind of those questions for working on college campuses.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. So I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat. So I think I'm going to give everyone a whole 8 minutes back in their day. But I wanted to say thank you again so much, especially to Stevie, also to Anita and Yoselin and Sarah for joining us, providing resources and context. And most of all, I hope that everyone on the call just feels a little bit less alone today. I know that, you know, I spend a lot of time trying to say, everything's great, I feel totally normal, but most of the time I don't. So we wanted to hold this space to share information with each other, but again, just to be together in this work. I hope everyone has the best of luck, has a great day, and happy voting. Thank you.